Okay, welcome to PENSARE Basketball Live and our long-awaited big board. The NBA Draft Lottery is a little less, well, a little bit more than 1 week away, and there's a lot on the line for the Toronto Raptors. There's a considered generational prospect named Cooper Flag. Most of you have heard of him. If you haven't heard of him, I didn't know the Amish watched this show, so welcome. That's awesome. And, today we're going to talk about the top 40 targets. The Raptors have the 39th pick, and they presumably have a top 10 pick. So we'll definitely look at that. We'll look at, how these players are sort of stocking up. And as it sort of happens around this time, people start to second guess themselves, right? We went through the entire college season. We watched Cooper Flag struggle, then become, this player that maybe everyone envisioned. I mean, even saying he struggled is a little bit disingenuous. He didn't really struggle, but I don't think he walked into this draft cycle as okay, he's going to come in and at 17 years old, he's going to be the best player in college basketball. But that's exactly where he ended up the season. So we got to see that progression. And I think we walked into this draft cycle thinking the 2025 draft class was loaded, absolutely loaded. Like this might be one of the best draft classes of all time. I don't think I'm there right now. I got to tell you, after a lot of players went back, there's at least 25 players that I think have dropped out of this draft over the last, month and a half where I thought for sure they're going to be picked in the top 50. What does that mean for the Raptors? That means more likely than not, the player that you're looking at 39 is probably a little bit worse today than it was 2 months ago, which kind of sucks. Really hoping for a great player there. Number two, with the lowest number of early entrants in years. Like, I think, what was it? 2011, there was like 300. I think it was just over 120 this year. So this is the lowest number in years. So probably you're probably not going to find Jamison Battle in the undrafted heap this year. You certainly might. Still a lot of really good players. So we're definitely going to talk about the top 40. We're going to look at the top 40. I have a very, very surprising name in my top five. And I mean, you were always going to get a senior ready to play at 39. That was never the issue. I think what you were hoping for if you were the Raptors was that there might be a freshman who, because there's such an emphasis on finding seniors in the 20s, that there might be a freshman who has a lot of upside who could fall to 39. Now, for those of you who are watching this who are not Raptor fans, I'll apologize in advance. Obviously, this is going to be very draft specific, but it's also going to be tailored to what the Raptors need and how the Raptors see this. And my board that you're going to see in about a minute and a half, that is more specific to how I think the Raptors view this draft. The Raptors always have a different board. I've always believed this. There's players on their board that are probably top 10 on their board that probably aren't top 20 on most boards. But that's what makes draft evaluation so interesting because it is really beauty in the eye of the beholder. Do you value measurements? Do you value pedigree? Do you value winning? Do you value experience? Do you value physicality? Do you value positional, maybe a specific position? Like, we need a center, we need a small forward, we need a guard, we need a point guard, we need some guard depth. We have too many bigs, or we don't have enough bigs. Or do you just straight up value athleticism, potential, raw tools? Do you value shooting? I think most teams value positional size. I can't think of a team that doesn't value positional size. Like, all things even. Most teams would probably pick the 6'4" point guard over the 6-foot point guard. I think most teams value skill. I think most teams value upside, youth, athleticism. I think, so if you're the Toronto Raptors, you're sitting in a heap of teams in the draft lottery. And I think, for the Raptors, the worst part is this year there's a lot of really good teams in the draft lottery. Like, usually the way the draft lottery breaks down is it's the 14 worst teams. But this year you have teams like Chicago, pretty decent drafting team. You have the Spurs twice, right? You have a lot of like decent organizations that are picking, and then there's a couple wild cards, right? The New Orleans Pelicans, they just changed their management. We have no idea what they're going to be doing, right? You got the Philadelphia 76ers, you got the Pelicans, you got the Washington Wizards, right? There are some teams, the Brooklyn Nets, Sean Marks, Brooklyn Nets, good organization. The Utah Jazz, who punted hard on this season, Danny Ainge. So you got some really good decision makers at the top of this draft. So that's sort of a complication for the Raptors, I think, going into this cycle, is that you'll be picking probably behind a whole bunch of teams that know what they're doing, which means the chances that that great prospect that you think is top 3, top 4, he might actually go top 3, top 4. And so obviously, if you're a Raptor fan, you're really hoping that you get some draft lottery luck on May 12th. Nevertheless, enough of this. Let's look at this. FA said, interested to see where Ryan Cockbrenner is on your board. Well, he is on my board. So here's my board, and it is a very strange one. Now, there have been 3 players that, really 3 players, maybe more, that I would say I have been so much higher on than the consensus, relatively speaking. This reminds me of Dyson Daniels all over again, Peyton Watson. There's always players in every draft class where I'm like, that right there, that's going to work. And that's going to rise up draft boards. With Dyson Daniels, I think it was 2022 draft class, Dyson Daniels. Scotty Barnes was 2021. So Scotty, I started mocking him top 4, top 5, when most mock drafts had him at 10th, 11th. So I felt that putting him top 5 was a bold statement. And a lot of people clowned me for it. And then, he goes through his workouts, and he goes through, meeting with teams, and teams see the improved shooting, and they're like, okay, I get it. I get it. Okay. With Dyson, it was even more of a leap, way more of a leap, because Dyson was projected as like a top 35 ish type of prospect coming out of the G League Ignite. And I started putting him in top 10. And I started putting him over names that people were not comfortable with at the time. And that was another player where I was like, you just wait. You just wait. When Dyson Daniels walks into the gym and people see him and they meet him and they interview him, he's going to rise up draft boards because somebody in the top 10 is going to fall in love with him. So this year, the 3 players that I feel are just way too low for everybody else. So I'm massively overcorrecting. The first is Arkansas's Adu Thero, right? I have him at 26. I could go a lot higher on him. I can get a lot higher on him. I can go top 20 on him. I really, really hope that other people don't see the value in Adu, and maybe the Raptors find their, few weeks ago, I made the Raptors should look at Jonathan Kuminga. Well, you maybe don't have to look at Jonathan Kuminga if you find Adu Thero. I think this is a late bloomer. I think this is a kid who has worked on his game tremendously, and the version of him that I saw this year at Arkansas was just so much better than the version I saw in previous years at Kentucky and even in high school. And he wasn't highly recruited, and he's just a player that I think could blow people away at the next level. I think he has great athleticism, obviously tons of holes in his game, and the jump shot is a huge question. But I think, yeah, I've watched a lot of tape on him after Rob talked to him, and damn, he is so good. He really is. He's very interesting. Hi, I'm Dirk saying, seeing Carter Bryant at 4 hurts my heart, not gonna lie. Okay, the second player, obviously, that I've been much higher on throughout the entire year, and that's Kaman Malawach. Now, Kaman is going through a world of issues with his visa. A lot of issues with the orange ban and the power in power in the United States, in the White House, South Sudan, politics, and lost amongst all this noise about the orange man is that Kaman's family is in dire need right now. So it sort of forced his hand. There's also limitations in terms of NIL money. Like a lot of players that went back to college basketball, they went back because of NIL money. And the thing is that when you look at it from that perspective, obviously it would help if the rules were not so skewed against international players that Kaman could then go back to Duke. There's not really a place for him to go back to Duke, though. I mean, it's not like Duke did not, you know, have one of the best classes of recruits coming in this year. They have a lot of really great players. I'm not saying he can't go back. I'm not saying Cooper can't go back. The point is, they kind of already replaced their positions at this point, and it just makes more sense if you're going to be a top 10 pick to just come out and then start the cycle on your next contract. So for Kaman, I think the urgency is even greater because of his family. But the Raptors will face a similar issue that they faced with Ulrich and Pascal, which is the visa issue. So they were not able to bring Pascal to Toronto for the workout. They had to work him out in Buffalo. And they're going to have a similar issue with Kaman. I don't think he'll be able to travel over the border before he signs his NBA contract. So that all being said, you know, does this kind of scare people? With African prospects, for a myriad of reasons, most of which I definitely do not agree with, uh, I think that a lot of people have a natural skepticism towards African prospects. I think there's always less sureness because you haven't really tracked them as long as other people have, as long as you've seen other players, like with a player like Cooper Flag. You've been tracking him in the United States since he was 13, right? You've been tracking a guy like Derek Queen. You've seen him come up through the AAU ranks. So, there's a little bit more familiarity with them. There's no concerns. And then I think midway through the year, Kaman had that situation where he threw up in one of the games, and then you just saw him fall down mock drafts. So Kaman walked into this season. I would say most mock drafts had him 18th, 13th, 14th, around there. I had him top 5, top 6 around that time. Then as the season went on, we saw his rim efficiency, we saw his shot blocking, you see the physical size, you see, hints of him being able to switch onto the perimeter. And then you're like, okay, I get it. And then we started to see him in the top 10, but then he had that throw up incident and suddenly, boom, back down to 14. I can't get a read on where most teams are on Kaman. What I can say is that, he is a clutch client. They will prioritize putting him in the right place. I think Toronto is the right place for him. And I do believe that if he's on the board, the Raptors will take him. I think he just makes a lot of sense in terms of what the Raptors need. And I think he has a lot more potential than what people think. I think people think of him as a rim running big who will, pretty much top out as a glorified role player. I think there's still, 10 to 15% chance that he becomes much, much more than a role player. I think his jump shooting can come along. I think his touch around the basket is very encouraging. I think, you know, I think I don't think he's in great, like, peak physical shape. Like, I think he can get much, much more explosive and much more athletic. And that's a scary thought. It's a scary thought. It's a scary, scary thought. And we just watched what Rudy Gobert did. Kaman is so much more skilled than Rudy Gobert, So again, there's a natural tendency to sort of downplay players who weren't necessarily overly productive. He was very productive. The raw numbers don't scream out at you. He scored in single digits. He didn't play a ton of minutes. He wasn't his team's best player. And so, his team didn't win a national title. He had a really disappointing game in his final game in college basketball. But of course, there's some extracurricular stuff that you need to factor in where, the visa stuff and the South Sudan politics stuff came out pretty much the day before that game. So maybe his mind was somewhere else and, totally forgiven for that. He's an 18-year-old kid. So anyway, I'm very high on Kaman, and as evidenced by the fact that he's number 3 on my board. Now, the fourth player, that's Carter Bryant. Now, I got to talk about Carter Bryant a lot because, this is a name that a month and a half ago, I was hearing people say, I don't know if he's a first round pick. And on April 2nd, I started to dig into Carter Bryant because I said, this is this year's Dyson Daniels, right? Not the same player, but a lot of the same stuff that I love about Dyson is what I love about Carter. And so I went through and I watched so much Carter Bryant. I think I've watched about 10 hours, 10, 11 hours of in-game footage. And that's a lot. Okay. We're going back to high school here. We're talking EYBL. We're talking about his game against Trey Johnson where he locked him up. damn, I'm so familiar with this guy. I know his game like the back of my hand at this point. So after watching all of that, I said on April 13th on X, I posted this clip of, Carter Bryant highlights, and I said, if the Raptors stay at 8, I wouldn't be surprised if they go off the board and pick Carter Bryant. At the time, I couldn't find a single mock draft that had him like higher than 17 or 18. I think most had him 20, 22, 24. Give me a W if you remember that. I think most of you have been tracking the mock drafts. Most of you can attest to that. And then 3 days ago, I looked up Ringer mock draft, has him at 10. NBA.com has him at 10. NBA Draft Room has him at 10. Well, there you go. The secret is out. Carter Bryant is a freaking really puzzling prospect if you want to talk about it from the perspective of trying to sell it to a casual fan. It's going to be really hard when the Raptors call this guy's name on draft night with the 7th or 8th pick for people to understand how you can pick a player who averaged 6 points per game, right? Uh, trade down if they get 8. You're not going to be able to get him if you trade down. I'm telling you. Okay, so again, there's a version of Carter Bryant that just really sucks in the NBA. And I'm not even trying to tell you that this is a 100% it's gonna work. Oh my god, it's like Scotty Barnes where I'm like so sure. No, I'm not so sure actually. I'm putting him at number 4 because I think the Raptors will be insanely high on him because he happens to have a lot of characteristics that the Raptors really, really value. And I'm not just talking on the court, I'm talking off the court. There's a lot of stuff. I think the Raptors will fall in love with his story, his entire story. To give you a glimpse of that story, um, there's family members in his family that are deaf. I believe his grandparents on his mother's side, and then his mother is like she's an ALS teacher, so he learned sign language as a young kid. Comes from a very very loving family, very loving family. Father was a former coach, Coach Kawhi Leonard in high school. Comes from elite sporting background, two-sport athlete, really good volleyball player as well. Whole family's full of volleyball players. Chose Arizona without a guarantee on minutes. Didn't want a guarantee on minutes. Didn't want a guarantee on role. Kind of wanted to earn it. Wanted to prepare himself for the next level. Really patient kid. Like has that sort of, I don't know how you describe it. Like that, my time will come, which you really do value for a kid who's not going to start. Like, let's just be real. Unless the Raptors make some massive roster decisions between now and the start of next season, whoever they draft ain't starting unless it's Cooper Flag, right? Dylan Harper might start, but even Dylan Harper it would be hard for Dylan Harper to start over RJ Barrett from a political perspective. Ain't none of these players starting over Scotty. Ain't none of them starting over Brandon Ingram. And even a guy like Kaman Malawach or Derek Queen, they're not starting over Jakob Poeltl. So whoever you draft has got to be comfortable with ASL. Sorry, not ALS, ASL. Sorry, I apologize. So he's already shown you that he's comfortable doing that. So that's the first thing. He has that similar, like when you listen to him talk, it almost sounds like you're listening to Jamal Shedd or Jacoby Walter talk. There's a soft spokenness, there's an eloquence, there's a wise beyond his years type of thing. He has some similarities with Jonathan Mobo, which is that in high school he was 5'11, then he hit this huge growth spurt, and he just had to learn how to play in his new body and ultimately play a completely different position because he was obviously a point guard or a guard. And then ultimately, because he grew to 6'8, he had to learn how to play the forward. And he's multi-positional. The Raptors love that. There was also he broke his tibia. He broke his leg in his freshman season. So he missed almost 2 years of crucial development during his formative stages. And I think that all of that has sort of slowed him down, if you will. There's a lot of camps you miss when you don't have that. There's a lot of in-game reps you miss. And when you break your leg, there's just not a lot you can do. So I think the Raptors may look at him like a little bit of a late bloomer as well, even though he's a freshman. I think they'd look at him as a late bloomer. So from that stuff, he's just wise beyond his years. When you listen to his interviews, even when he's 15 or 16 years old, you don't feel like you're listening to a 15 or 16-year-old. I think this is a testament to the fact that he had to endure something so difficult early on, which is the broken leg, the injury, the rehab, having to be patient, having to trust God, having to turn to his Bible, having to face the difficult questions of, will I be able to play basketball again? I'll tell you another thing that I love about him. He really is a student of the game. Like, he's a basketball encyclopedia. This is something that I noticed in Amen and Asar Thompson very early when they were with OTE. And I know that it doesn't necessarily equate one to one, but I care that you're obsessed with the sport, right? Especially because sometimes with bigger athletes, especially with super athletes or, bigger players, who maybe you think were they pushed into basketball because it's lucrative, because the NIL, you always wonder, like, do they really love it? Are they obsessed with it? He's obsessed with it. Like, he's obsessed with basketball, which is what I think maybe differentiates him from a lot of other players who might fit his mold. There are players that have been phenomenal busts that will remind you of Carter Bryant. I'll name you a couple that I think you could make a very fair comparison to Carter Bryant, and I think I wouldn't fight you too much on it. Number one is Patrick Williams. Number two is Carter Knox. I think both of these players have a lot in common with Carter Bryant from a physical tools standpoint, even from a game standpoint. Hmm, sure. And those two players clearly are not what you're looking for if you're the Raptors, right? So I understand the fear and trepidation. There's also a player that I was very, very high on a few years ago. It was Peyton Watson. I think he has a lot in common with Peyton Watson too. So in a lot of ways, he reminds me of the blend of the following players. These are the players that I most liken him to: Dyson Daniels, Peyton Watson, Scotty Barnes, Jarris Walker, Jason Tatum. That's the cocktail. Let's talk about Carter Bryant, the player. We've talked a lot about Carter Bryant, the person, Carter Bryant, the son, Carter Bryant, the student athlete, Carter Bryant, the basketball enthusiast. What about Carter Bryant, the player? Well, put him number 4 on my board, so I must think a lot about him as a player. I think a lot about him as a player type, and I also trust that the cocktail of other stuff is going to make him the player. He's not the player right now, though. That's a great example. 2 more players that I should include: Jalen Johnson, Trey Murphy. So you're right. Jalen Johnson might actually be the best example. So yes, Jalen Johnson makes a lot of sense. He has the same size as Jalen Johnson. He runs the floor like Jalen Johnson. He dunks the basketball like Jalen Johnson. He has a lot in common with Jalen Johnson. The appeal is that in a very limited role, he was able to succeed at Arizona. He came off the bench for all but 5 games. He actually didn't crack double digits in any but 5 games. Shot 37% from 3, shot 69% from the free throw line. I think 48% from the field. He has a really smooth looking jumper. I think the mechanics are flawless at the top. I think the base could use some work. I think his defensive technique is fantastic, and it has been fantastic since high school. I think he has a potential to be a first team all defensive guy like 10 times. Like, he's that good. He reminds me of OG Anunoby defensively in so many ways. He just sucks up space, man. Like, his ability to guard 2, 3 positions, his ability to recover, switch his hips. It's not perfect, obviously, the defensive technique is not perfect, he's not but he's so disruptive, he's so active, and he's so tenacious on that end, and he seems to really enjoy it. That's perhaps the most important thing here. He really takes pride on that defensive end. I think the rebounding will translate very much so, especially if he's a wing. He will be one of the best rebounding wings in the NBA. He has a great nose for the basketball. He gets up very quickly. He has great hands for it. And he's got really broad shoulders, which means he could actually be a 4 down the line, right? Chosen said, "What's the gap between Carter and Adu?" Well, interestingly enough, Carter's kind of old for his class, and Adu is kind of young for his class, so they're not actually that even they're not even that far apart in age. I think the gap is just overall. I think there's a version of Carter that turns into a star. I don't think there's a version of Adu that turns into a star. Now, most people are very, very comfortable writing off the star potential on either one of these players. They don't see a star in either. They see role player, role player. I don't agree, and I'll tell you why. So with Carter, I think there might be a little bit more in between game than he was given a chance to show. I think there's a natural bias among scouts, a lot of scouts that just they don't like to take a chance on guys who aren't very productive at the college level, right? Now, they don't really care too much about why they weren't productive. They don't really care that their role wasn't such or, that they came off the bench or that they had other players on their team that were, maybe upperclassmen, that they were selfless enough. Carter's very selfless. I think that's something that I love about him as well. That's why I said the Scotty Barnes thing. Putting Scotty and Carter together as kind of a duo defensively, that's just a cheat code. That's a cheat code. It reminds me a little bit of maybe not quite to this level of defensive, but kind of like when the Rockets run out Amen Thompson and Tari Eason, right? You get so much size, so much length, so much positional versatility. And I think for the Raptors, you just get so much bigger on the wing with him, right? In a lot of ways, he could satisfy the role that Ochai Agbaji had last year. Solid corner shooter. But unlike Ochai, again, his game is not specifically to the corners. You're not drafting Dorian Finney-Smith here, right? Like you're not drafting KCP. Like there's more to this game. Like I think he can put the ball on the ball on the floor. I think his handle is a little bit upright and probably not very complicated at this point, but he has counters. His wide shoulders and really decent footwork at times give me a lot of faith that there will be some midi pull turnaround stuff in his future. I think he's a really smooth athlete. Like when you typically see players who are his size, 6'8", 230, they're not quite so fluid. He's a very fluid mover. The fluid movement plus the athleticism gives me some hope for a little bit more in terms of downhill attack stuff, right? The jump shot opens all of that up. He doesn't even need to be that shifty. He just needs to attack closeouts. He has a decent first step. It's not elite, but it's decent. He's just a really good athlete. Like it's not even like his I doubt his vertical is even going to be higher than Scotty Barnes. It's just he's like a track star. You know what I mean? He's fast, he's powerful. Maybe he's like a football player, you know what I mean? So I wanted to know your thoughts on Jalen Williams pre-draft, where you want the people, where you one of the people who was higher on him. I would put Jeremiah Fierce over Trey Johnson. Uh, I was not necessarily that high on Jalen Williams. Uh, Jeremiah Fears over Trey Johnson, certainly, you could make that argument. Uh, Carter Bryant is not getting picked before Ace Bailey. So there's the thing. I think the Raptors are different than most teams. Also, I believe most teams will have Ace Bailey over Carter Bryant. I just think most people are just really miffed when a player like Scotty Barnes goes above a player who's just more productive, right? Jalen Suggs was more productive. Scotty Barnes is the better prospect, right? Peyton Watson was not one of the 280 most productive college players, but he still went in the first round. Just different, man. When you talk about NBA athleticism, when you talk about NBA size, when you talk about NBA skill sets, when you talk about projectable NBA defenders, like the other good thing about Carter is I think he can come in right in on day one and fill a role, which is very important for your development. I mean, just I want to throw that out there. You have players like Grady Dick right now who cannot fulfill a single role defensively. You had a player like Jacoby Walter, who, despite his best efforts, was not a plus defender this past year. Like he's got a lot of potential. He's not a plus defender. Here you have Carter Bryant, who's 19 years old, who can walk in on day one and be a 3-and-D wing. He can hit open shots. He has. I'll give you some more advantages to Carter before we move on to other players. I think he's a very good cutter. I think he's a really good transition player. He fills the lanes really well. He has really decent off-ball patterns, right? He's not stagnant. He has moments where he's stagnant, and certainly Darko and the coaching staff have to work with him on that. But he has also moments where, you'll notice he'll make a read based on what's happening on the other side of the floor. He'll relocate to the corner to provide space for a cut. And it just shows that he thinks the game a little bit better than the average freshman. Sometimes that means just moving 6 feet to give the driving guard a better passing angle to find him. Sometimes that means relocating after getting an offensive rebound and then trailing out to get down to the three. Again, like there's just good patterns that fit with what the Raptors want to play like, right? The ability to guard 3-4 positions has always been something the Raptors have valued. Positional size, versatility, youth, upside, athleticism, wingspan. He has it all. The personality stuff, I guarantee you, Masai will meet this kid. He'll fall in love with him. I'll bet you anything. I've watched Masai for years and know how Masai thinks. I know like how Masai and Bobby like typically. Again, I was wrong about the Grady Dick thing. I'll admit to that. I didn't see Grady coming, but for the most part, I understand how this front office values people. And Carter is just one of those people that you're just going to fall in love with. He walks in your door, you're going to be like, "Yep, that's a Toronto Raptor." And it's not going to be popular, and I'm trying to get ahead of it. The reason I'm talking about Carter so much right now is because I have a streaking suspicion that Kaman is going to go top 5. The Raptors not going to have a top 5 pick, and then the Raptors are going to be stuck picking between Carter and Kasparas Yakuchonis and possibly Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen at that 8 or 7 spot wherever they end up. And I think Carter's a really decent player for the Raptors to get really familiar with because it's pretty unlikely that he goes higher than your pick. Now, of course, it's perfectly possible that he goes higher with your pick. I could see a team like Brooklyn easily taking a swinger on him if they don't feel really comfortable with one of the big men. I could see Philly taking a flyer on him. I could certainly see a guy like Daryl Morey seeing the vision of what Carter Bryant can be. You just never know, man. Like I'm telling you, like there might be a team like Charlotte. Like they just took Tijon Salon last year. He's much better than Tijon Salon. So like there's definitely a version of this where he just goes so high and people are just like, I can't believe he went so high. The cool thing for the Raptors, of course, is if he goes super high, that might mean someone that you really, really want falls to you at 7 or 8. But also, if he doesn't go super high, he might be the highest upside player left on the board when you pick. And yeah, so let's take a look at some of the rest. Now, look, I mean, obviously, Colin Murray Boyles, I think he projects to be, let's just talk through, going from 1 all the way to like 22 or so, right? So yeah, with Cooper Flag, obviously, if you get the number 1 pick, hallelujah. You got a future franchise type of player, you get an all-star, all-league defender, and then you just pray for health. And I think he fits in on day 1. I don't know how you're going to balance out this roster, whether that means Scotty and BI play the 2-3 and then Cooper plays the 4. and then you find another home for RJ. There ain't no way in hell that Cooper Flag's coming off the bench as a rookie. So immediately, I think somebody gets moved the second you get that pick. I'm hoping for it. I'm praying for it. Trust me, I love Carter Bryant. I love Kaman Malawach, but Cooper Flag is definitely the number one target. Really. Number two, obviously, Dylan Harper. I think, I can go a lot of different ways on Dylan. I really don't think he's like a franchise savior type of player, but I certainly value his two-way potential. And I can certainly see a world in which he's, 5, 6-time All-Star. I'd be very surprised if he's like 2, 3-time All-NBA. So I don't know. Franchise savior, maybe not. Franchise player, maybe. A lot in common with Cade Cunningham, though. A lot. Probably a better defender at this stage than Cade. Probably a better athlete. We'll see. Come on, Carter. We talked about them. Number 5, VJ Edgecombe. Again, depends on how much you really trust the on-ball creation. Really depends on how highly you value his defensive upside. Does he become lockdown defender? I think on a team with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram, really helps to have off-ball wings cut and can run in transition like this. So certainly, there's a version of VJ Edgecombe that turns into an all-star. There's also a version of him that turns into a career starter or maybe a six-man type. So Ace Bailey, size, shot making, cool, right? I really, really hope his defense translates at the NBA level. He has a lot of good defensive tools. I don't say he's as good defensively as Carter Bryant. He's not nearly the event creator that Carter Bryant is, but he has a lot of length and a lot of positional versatility. I don't think his lateral quickness is as good as Carter's either. So really, the offensive gap between them is enormous, though. Like in terms of his shot package and creation and stuff, I see high bust potential with Ace Bailey. Like among the top 7 players, he has the highest bust potential of any of them. Like there's a really, really good chance this guy's like a career backup 8 years into his career. There's also a chance he's like a second team All NBA. So you're it's a very feast or famine type of pick. I would certainly lean heavily on his interviews. I've listened to a lot of his interviews. I got to tell you, between his interviews, VJ, Carter, Kaman, Dylan, Cooper, I walked away the least impressed with his. So that's just me reading on it. Obviously, teams are going to be really high on him. When he walks into the gym, he starts hitting shots. You're going to see Kevin Durant. You're going to see what you want to see. You're going to see Michael Porter Jr. And then you're just going to ignore all the analytics. You're going to ignore the free throw shooting. You're going to ignore a lot of stuff. If you trust his work ethic, if you trust his humility, if you trust his mindset, if you trust his defense, if you trust his health, I don't see why you would take him outside the top 5. He's definitely a top 5 pick. But if you don't trust any of those factors, there's a lot of bust potential here. Number 7, Trey Johnson. Gotten a little bit higher on Trey Johnson since my last, draft talk. I think there's a lot of untapped playmaking stuff that he didn't get to show this year that I think will translate at the next level. I think he'll be a really, really productive starter for a really long time. I don't know if he'll be an all-star. Jeremiah Fears, another sort of, let's call it like feast or famine type of pick, right? There's a lot of chances that this just never works at the NBA level, right? That his decision making and, just doesn't quite catch up. And he just ends up becoming this very twitchy, dynamic, athletic guy who gives you a flash in the pan every so often. But the game just never completely translates. I like Jeremiah Fears in Toronto for a lot of reasons. Number one, I think Darko could really work with him. I think Darko's a bit of a guard whisperer. I think Darko has worked with players like him in the past. And, I like his jump shot. I think his jump shot will work at the NBA level. And the Raptors really don't have a player like this who can just consistently get into the paint. So I value him over guys like Con Knoopel and Derek Queen, Noah Senge, etc. I've highlighted players in orange as like very key draft targets for the Raptors, like players that I think the Raptors might be even higher on than the consensus. Now it's kind of funny because Cooper is orange. So I mean, like the Raptors might be even higher on Cooper than everybody else is on Cooper. Yellow is like they'll like them. Like, I have a feeling the Raptors will like these players more than the average. And then White is just players that I don't think the Raptors will be like necessarily clamoring over, either due to system fit, roster fit, or just positional overlap. The next up, Con Canoopal. I think, I've talked about my thoughts on Con many times. I think he has a lot more. I think he's the best pure shooter in this draft. I think he has a lot more three-level scoring potential, a little bit of Austin Reeves, not just trying to compare white players to white players, maybe a little bit of Devin Booker. I think he has a chance to be a top 5 player in this draft. I really do. I think there's a chance if some of those higher upside athletic guys don't work out, there's a very, very high floor that he's just a rotation player. Like, he's a rotation player. He's 100% going to be a rotation player in the NBA. That is like among the top 9 players, there are very few players that I'm more sure are just going to be perfectly good NBA players than Con Canoopal. Like, he just finds a way. Number 10, Derek Queen. Again, I don't like his off-ball stuff. Love his on-ball stuff. Don't know which team is going to hand him the ball to create, 50 possessions a game, but we shall see, right? The defense is concerning, partially because I don't necessarily think he fulfills the role of a natural 5 at the NBA level. He's not an anchor for your defense. He doesn't have the motor to be like the weak side shot blocker. He does have active hands. He does have really good hand-eye coordination. He does move his feet relatively well on the perimeter. So, I think you're going to need to get some buy-in from him. And again, I have questions about his motor, and I have questions about his willingness to guard at the next level, right? And but I don't have questions about his talent. His talent is off the charts. His ball skills at his size are incredible. His handle, his passing, his reading of the game, his intelligence is really next level shit. There's a lot of I don't want to say Jokic because I just think that's sacrilegious, but you know, a little bit of Domas, a little bit of Alperen Şengün. He's in that same family tree of basketball player. He's probably more athletic than either one of those guys. And, I would like to see him in a strength and conditioning program. He's, relatively, I don't know, he's relatively physical. He seems to enjoy physicality. He has, like, again, pretty good touch around the rim. So, yeah, he could be a very, very good player. I think he'll go a lot higher than 10, but I think from a Raptors perspective, as much as Darko and them love passing at that stage, it's just putting him on a roster with Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram just feels like a really, really bad idea. And it's the same reason that I don't think the Raptors will be super high on Colin Murray Boyles, despite the great defender that he is. Noah Senge, I mean, I don't know, man. I want to see it so badly. Like, I want to trust the work lately and put him higher than this. I can't quite get higher than this though. You know, very fluid mover, very good athlete, brimming with, upside and shooting potential and maybe some more. I don't trust his passing that much. Honestly, I should probably mention I don't necessarily know how much I trust Carter Bryant's passing either, but I do think that he's a really smart kid, and I think he'll be more than willing to learn how to become a much better passer. But yeah, I have some concerns. Rasheer Fleming, again, like the projectable development year over year, the trackable upside, there's great size there. He's 6'9", 7'4" wingspan. He's just a mammoth athlete at that wing position, multi-positional. I don't know how much I trust the shooting to hold up, but you know, we'll see. I think I can see him being a league average shooter. I don't know if he'll be a shooter, but I can see him being a league average shooter who can survive on that end. And then, of course, defensively, Rasheer Fleming is fantastic in terms of just event disruption. Again, if I'm projecting forward, I don't think he projects to be as good a defender as Carter Bryant, but certainly do think he's going to be a great defender. I think Colin Murray Boyles has a chance, on the other hand, to be the best defender in this draft class. Like, I think he has Draymond potential defensively. I think he's physical. I think he's extremely coordinated. I think he's extremely smart. And I think he has great physical tools at the NBA level to be just an incredible defender, great creator, and possibly an underrated scorer. Like, I know people don't necessarily associate Colin Murray Boyles with scoring, but I could really see him, carving out a role as like a 15, 16 point per game scorer just by being very opportunistic and very intelligent. Great passer, right? Great passer. So again, there's a world in which Colin Murray Boyles is much more than just a role player. Like that he could be like a secondary, tertiary star. There is some upside there. And I can't tell you I'd be super, super upset if the Raptors did pick him, especially if they fell to like 9 and they didn't want to pick Con Canoopel or something like that. And they were just like, let's just go with the sure thing and let's just get a really good defender. I just worry about Colin Murray Boyles playing with Scotty Barnes. Like, that to me sounds weird. Colin Murray Boyles, on the other hand, playing in place of Scotty Barnes is great. So you have the greatest Scotty sub, but I really want a player who can play with Scotty, which is why I prefer Carter Bryant, right? You have a great defender who can run the court and is a huge vertical lob threat, good off ball mover, great shooter. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's what you want next to Scotty Barnes. If you need defense, and again, the size, he's a little bit bigger uh, than Colin Murray was. Number 14, Kasparis Yakuchonis. He continues to move down my board. I think I've had him as high as 11, 10, 9, but I don't necessarily trust the burst. But I do think the Raptors will like him more than most because they do value positional size, they do value playmaking, they do value basketball IQ, and I think he's a very good young player. If the Raptors do end up, if he falls down the draft boards and the Raptors end up, trading something to get, I don't know, whether that's something be Ochai Abaji or Jameson Battle or whatever the hell, they end up having to trade to get another first rounder, and then they pick Kasparis Yakuchonis, I wouldn't be that surprised. I could see a player, a coach like Darko Rakovic really liking him. Number 15 out of Georgetown, Thomas Sorber. I really like Thomas Sorber's game. I don't know how I feel about his athleticism. But I do think that he is a very productive big man. And I do think that his rebounding and defense will translate to the next level. I don't think it'll translate right away, but I think within a few years, you'll have yourself a serviceable rotation big. Uh, Number 16, Jace Richardson. I have to do a lot more film work on Jace Richardson and Nick Clifford. I do think that they're both very productive, very good players. And I do think, by the way, just so we're clear on this, I do think both players are better right now than Carter Bryant and Kaman Malawach. It doesn't mean that they're better NBA prospects, but it does mean that they're better players right now. So I think for both those guys, Asa Newell, same thing. I think he's a much better player than Carter Bryant right now. But what is the upside, right? What is the projection? What type of player can this be if we hit on the development, right? Sometimes you hit on the development and then you realize, shit, it's still a 5'11 player who can't score above the rim. You know what I mean? So it's like with Jamal Shed, right? Jamal Shed is going to become the best version of what Jamal Shed is going to be. And Jamal Shed is awesome, right? But he's still a 6-foot guard who's kind of below the rim and kind of has a wonky jump shot. So if it becomes like the best version of what Jamal Shed's going to be, it's going to be a really good player in the NBA. It's not going to be Ja Morant. You can't turn Jamal Shed into Ja Morant. You can try to turn Trey Johnson into some version of Ja Morant, though. And that's kind of the gap. So again, like achieving 100% outcome on what Asa Newell will be is not equivalent to even achieving the 75th percentile version of what Carter Bryant can be. That's what you want in a top lottery pick, right? That's why you don't pick Rafael Arujo at 8. That's why you don't pick Terrence Ross at 8. You don't pick these players at 8 because and again, I'm not one of those people that's just like you gotta always go for the Tijan Salons, in the NBA draft. You always got to go for the Bruno Caboclos. No, certainly not. You don't always have to go for those players. And I understand sometimes at 13 or 14, you just want to get a stable NBA rotation player. You don't want to blow the pick. But I think that when you have a player like a Carter Bryant or, player like Ace Bailey, who has just like that immense ceiling, you do allow yourself a little bit of a buffer zone because even like let's just say there's 100 different players that player can be, and each is better than the last, then the 75th player is still better than the 100th player for someone else. And that's kind of where I'm at with Asa Newell. And Yegor Demon, I could see him flying up draft boards in the lead up to the lottery, especially as this draft is not nearly as good as maybe advertised. I think his jump shot is a real concern. I really do. I think he shoots it kind of flat. And you know, not really inviting physicality. I don't love that when I see it at the college level, because if you don't want physicality at the college level, you definitely not going to want physicality from Draymond Green and Alperen Şengün and, Steven Adams at the NBA level, right? So I don't like players who are shy with contact. That's actually why I like Jacoby Walters so much. It's like he doesn't shy away from contact. Scotty Barnes, at Florida State at least, didn't really shy away from contact. He'd go into it. So you want players who invite contact. Uh, yeah. And Jaeger Demon didn't do that very much. A trio of wings: Noah Penda, Will Riley, and Hugo Gonzalez, that I think could all be really high targets for the Raptors, especially if they do end up, trading for maybe one of those Brooklyn picks in the middle of the first round. I do think Liam McNeely is going to fall. Nolan Traore could be a lot higher on the Raptors board than this. I could certainly see a world in which, maybe the Raptors view him a little bit differently. I don't think there is. I don't think so. And, the aforementioned 26th overall, Adu Thiero, again, just the type of player you got to kind of learn about a little bit, see him the way the Raptors would see him, read through his interviews, listen to his interviews, try to understand how this guy has sort of outworked everybody around him to become the player that he is. And I think that late development story where, he wasn't recruited out of high school, nobody cared about him. And then suddenly, he gets his dad played for Coach Cal. He's playing now for Coach Cal. It's one of his few recruitment offers. He follows Coach Cal to Arkansas. Now he becomes this, like, he does all the leg raises and he becomes this fundamentally different athlete. That story will just appeal to the Raptors so much. I could really only pray that he's there at 39. And if we pass on him at 39, I'm gonna be so pissed off. Like I might break my screen. So I really hope the Raptors look at him. Obviously, Bogu Markovic is a very skilled player who plays for Mega in Serbia. I think the Raptors will be very plugged into him because they really don't have a player like him. Obviously, they've been looking for a player like this for a while. A stretch big who can play with Scotty. I don't know about the defense though. I really don't. I don't know what role he plays defensively, but certainly he's very skilled. He is able to handle the basketball full court. Think Nikola Jovic. I think there's a little bit of parallel there. I'm not just comparing them because they're both Serbian players, but certainly, you know, he's a very interesting player. And actually, Danny Wolf is a very similar player in that sense that he is big and can handle the basketball and, has very good ball skills. And then you have a pair of guards, Walter Clayton Jr., who we all watched with the Florida Gators. And I think, this is a player who will probably appeal very much to the Raptors. I don't know how much he'll appeal to the Raptors relative to how much he appeals to everybody else, but I could imagine the Raptors being just as high on him, if not higher than most teams, because they've kind of had success with this player type before. I do see a little bit of Fred VanVleet in him. I do. He's bigger. He's obviously bigger than Fred VanVleet. And FA saying Clayton Jr. will go higher. We'll see, man. We'll see. We'll see if he goes a little bit higher. I think he'll go right in the 20s and, probably closer to 25 than 21. But we'll see. If he goes teens, I'll be very surprised. I won't be disappointed. I'll be happy for him. He's obviously worked very hard for it. I do have number 33, Miles Bird. I think he's a fantastic defender. And obviously, if the Raptors do not manage to get Carter Bryant, at in the lottery, and they don't go for a Thiero, then my other hope is that Miles Bird falls right in the draft. I just think you gotta find some way to replicate some version of what OG Anunoby was doing on this roster. I think it's a very, very important role to sort of get that dog defensively on the wing who can just come in and shut down possessions. And it's sort of shocking to me how the Raptors keep going out of their way to avoid that player. Like, it's not even like trying to avoid that player. It's not like the player grows on trees. It's not like there's hundreds of players in every draft who can do that shit, obviously, right? FA saying Ryan, if we don't get Malawach, you could easily draft both. I don't see it as one or the other. James saying Malawach will bust. I don't think so, man. I don't see a world in which Kaman will bust. I've known a lot about him. gotten to know a lot about him over the years. There's just, again, there's certain players where you start to do the evaluation on them, and it goes well beyond what you see on the basketball court. It sort of goes to the point of like what you see off the basketball court. It's the story. It's what they're doing, why they're doing it, who they're doing it for. It was the same thing with Ulrich. Like when you hear the story about like him wanting to build hospitals back home, and I know this all sounds very abstract to most people. I feel like most people who are not familiar with my draft coverage over the years don't really understand why I even care what a kid is trying to do with their money or that stuff. It matters to me. It matters to me a lot. I'll give you an example. I watched a Carter Bryant video uh, during my research phase, I think 4 weeks ago, and he was asked about the alma mater of various NBA players. So it was like Ja Morant, you know, uh, who else was he asked about? Buddy Hield. He was asked about all these players. In fact, let me see if I can pull that video up. It's hilarious. Hold on. Let me see. TikTok. Carter Bryant. I think it kind of shocks you that he knew any of those answers, much less all of the answers. Okay, let me just figure this out here. Okay. Share. Okay. Uh how would I find it? I'm not very familiar with TikTok, so quiz. Would this be it?
Hey, it's getting a little wicked. It ain't sweet no more. It ain't sweet no more.
No. Where is it?
I'm gonna be a good teammate and get drinks for all my guys. Look it. I got y'all. I got y'all. Good teammate activities, you know. I'm good. We both know why you got it. You lying? I don't I pass the rock every time I got it. You airballed. Yesterday I threw you a dime and you airballed. I'm lying. You said when because you shot multiple airballs.
That's funny. That's funny. I'll give you that. That's funny as hell. Oh, we need to find this. Sorry, guys. I should have loaded that up. It was just an idea that I had. So it was like, anyways, I apologize. Okay. So I gotta pull this off. I'm just gonna get lost on TikTok and end up watching cat videos. Anyways, my point was that he was asked for all these players. It was like Ja Morant and all these players. And he listed all of them. He knew Embiid went to Kansas. Okay, knowing Embiid went to Kansas is not a big deal because Embiid is like a frigging, he's an MVP. But knowing that Ja Morant went to Murray State is just so abstract for some people if you're not following basketball. You know what I mean? Like most of like basketball junkies would definitely know the answer to most of these questions. But I gotta tell you, like there was one or two that made me kind of even go like, And I follow the draft every single year. So I was just impressed as how that his basketball knowledge was like that. And again, I mentioned it earlier. Amen and Asar had a very similar sort of index knowledge of basketball players like that too. So yeah, I think it's very obvious to me, you know, when you are passionate about something and when you're not passionate about something. And you don't bet against passion, right? It was the same thing with kind of Kobe Bryant, right? Like, or even Scotty Barnes, right? Scotty Barnes, very passionate about basketball. He's very obsessed with basketball. So, when he's not like when he's not on company time, what's he doing? Right? There's a lot of players when they're not on company time, they're just playing video games, or they're out, or they're blowing their money on, bullshit, or they're trying to do something else to get away from basketball. I want to draft a player for whom basketball is the break. I want to draft a player like who's like, "Yo, I'm having a bad day. Let me go into the gym for 6 hours and go hoop." It's the same reason you don't bet against a player like DeMar DeRozan. It's the same reason, like these call it hoop junkies. These people are they're just obsessed with the game of basketball. It's really hard to be bad at something when you're super passionate about it and you have all the physical requirements and mental requirements to be really good at it. I'll tell you another thing that I appreciate about Carter, and I hate to keep going back to him, but obviously he's number 4 on my board, and he's not number 4 on anyone else's board in the whole world right now. I'm pretty much assuming that I'll be the first person in the world to put him top 5, so that when he does go top 7 or top 8 in the draft, I'll look like a genius. But I'm gonna say this: I feel that he is extremely calm under pressure. And that's another thing that I really like about him. He does not rattle. He does not seem, hyper reactionary on the basketball court. It's not like 2, 3 misses and he's going to start changing things about his game. There was a play, I want to say it was against Houston. I've watched so much of his film now. The games are just sort of running together at this point because I didn't watch them throughout a year. I watched them like back to back to back to back like a crazy person. So I think it was a play against Houston where, he kind of goes up for this reverse layup and then he gets blocked. And I think like 4 possessions down, he tried the exact same move again. So it didn't even deter him. Like he didn't care, Or there was another play where it was like in transition. There was a play where he kind of went for an up and reverse and then got blocked and then came down again and did almost the exact same move. So it just reminds it's the same thing with a shot. Like he airballs a shot. He didn't airball a lot of shots. Most of his misses were actually very good misses. And he didn't miss a lot because he shot 37% from 3. But yeah, I mean, even the shooting, like 37% is not all equal, and a lot of people are very quick to say, "Oh, it wasn't on very high volume." Well, relative to his attempts, it was on very high volume, and 3-pointers made up a large part of how he scored the basketball. It was all threes and dunks basically with him, right? So the way I see it is there's like different versions of 37%. There's all catch and shoot open jumpers, 37%. Like there's a big who nobody trusts to shoot who scores 37% on low volume. But Carter was guarded a lot, and this is not a small sample size. Like I know a lot of people are very, very dubious about small sample size, but he's also been a good shooter at previous levels. He was a good shooter in EYBL as well. So what I like about him is that he sort of shot from everywhere. Like his shot profile is a little bit dispersed around the perimeter. There's left corner shots, right corner shots, wing shots, above the break shots, transition shots, pull-up shots. There's one dribble crossover shots. There's one dribble step backs. There's a lot of one pump fake sidestep. Like there's a lot of different types of ways that he got his 3-pointer off. And the cool thing is his release is so pure at the top and his size so high. Like so he's so big. So 6'8" with a huge wingspan. I don't know what his wingspan is, but I guarantee you it's going to measure out higher than 7'3". So 7'2", 7'3". So you get the 7'2", 7'3" wingspan plus the 6'8", plus the perfect jump shot, plus a really good release, plus quick release, plus he's a good shooter. Like you're not gonna be able to touch the shot. It's gonna be a spacing cheat code at the NBA level. And then you add in the fact that he has a decent first step and can easily, pull the shot, but also easily beat the pump fake and then take 2 dribbles and he's dunking the basketball. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like with the NBA court, the geometry of Carter Bryant changes everything. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So again, it might seem very, very unorthodox and weird to put him over players like Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe, who have been consistently mocked much, much higher than him because Carter was not even mocked as a first rounder a month ago. But this is the draft process. There's obviously players who've kind of hidden in plain sight. Arizona is obviously part of one of the best conferences in college basketball. It is a conference that the Raptors consistently have drafted from. They've clearly been following this kid for a while. And you know what? Like, maybe they thought that he'd be a deeper draft target for them. And that's why they were comfortable, picking where, because again, I said it when the Raptors showed their hand earlier this season and they weren't like aggressively tanking. If you remember that, like they were willing to win games. And the first thought I had was, there's a player like Dyson Daniels that they're targeting in this draft. There's that riser that they don't think is going to go top 10 unless they go top 10. Do you know what I mean? And that's probably why they were comfortable with it, because for them it was probably like, okay, like, consider it this way. If your board, if let's just pretend for a second this is actually the Raptors board, right? Well, now your entire late season push makes complete sense, doesn't it? Because nobody else is picking Carter Bryant at 4. And if you have the 4th pick, you're picking a player that nobody else was going to grab top 8. So now what advantage do you have by actually tanking? The only advantage you could possibly have is getting Cooper Flag or Dylan Harper. So without those 1 or 2, the minute you get to 3, you're already picking a guy who's on most boards 7th. At 4, you're picking a guy who's probably 10th to 15th on most boards. Do you see what I mean? So if you have a different view of the draft and the draft board, then it kind of makes sense for why you would approach the draft this way. Now, obviously, there's a chance that this is wrong, that the Raptors actually prioritize VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey considerably more than Kaman and Carter Bryant. I would just be very surprised. I'd be very surprised by it. And again, like, as much as the Raptors value playmaking, I don't think Carter Bryant is a non-playmaker. I definitely think that I've seen enough playmaking chops from him at high school. And among all the players that I showed you here, I would say the players that I am the most researched on at this point, apart from Cooper, Dylan, Ace, and VJ, are probably Carter, Kon Kanoupal, and Kaman Malawach. So, I think maybe if I do a little bit more work over the next couple of weeks on Nick Clifford, Jace Richardson, Thomas Sorber, I can get a little bit higher on them, maybe a little bit lower. Sometimes you watch these players, you watch a few more games, and you're like, I can't quite get that high on them anymore. So we'll see. We will definitely see. I will be continuing draft content tonight. So there's a special draft guest coming on from Australia who's a draft analyst. I don't know if we're going to be doing a live or we're going to do a recording, and then I'm going to release it tomorrow as a, live watch along or a live premiere, what they call, YouTube calls it. So we will see how that goes. But that's going to be a fantastic conversation. And it's going to follow in, as episode 2 of that draft series that we were talking about a few weeks ago. So that's going to be really fun. And yeah, we'll have a clearer idea once the Raptors, solidify themselves in the upcoming draft lottery. Once we get a clear idea of, okay, the Raptors are picking 7th, 8th, whatever, I think it'll be a little bit easier to hone in, right? Last leg, but Carter, Fears versus Carter Bryant. Well, I think Carter is just bigger athlete, probably better athlete. I know Fears is like the more explosive athlete, very coordinated, very shifty, but still 6'4". Carter Bryant's upside is Tatum. I think his aesthetic upside is Tatum. I don't think he can ever be as good a player as Jason Tatum. I think some people have questioned whether Carter has gotten that much better over the last couple of years, and that might be, I think it'll be on him to show in workouts that he has gotten better. So Bobby said the Raptors tried to hit some home runs in the draft and needed to hit more singles, so they will probably tend to play it safe unless they're very high on someone. So that's the thing. I don't think that Kaman or Carter are home runs necessarily. Both project to be role players. So you're not Ace Bailey is the home run, right? Jeremiah Fears is the home run. Carter does not have Tatum's handle. I don't think Tatum had great handle, to be honest with you, but sure. I certainly understand what you're saying. I also think that I don't think that I don't think his role was such that he was asked to do that. And I don't think that matters because I think from the Raptors perspective, they're kind of looking at this from like, how will this translate to the NBA court? He's an NBA ready player right now. That's not something you can say about a lot of players in this, at least a lot of freshmen in this draft, right? Jeremiah Fears cannot hold his own defensively on an NBA court for the next 3 years. Trey Johnson is not a good defender and probably never will be a good defender. Like, again, you can say Trey Johnson is a way better player than Carter Bryant. I can also tell you Carter Bryant locked him up when they played every time. I don't want to say every time, but he's locked him up. Like, he can't score on him. So you want to put Trey Johnson next to Grady Dick, Scotty Barnes. Yeah, there's like offensive synergy there, and I could see it working. Defensively, it's just one more player you got to cover for. Jeremiah Fears, again, there's twitchiness. Maybe he turns into a good defender. Maybe he doesn't turn into a good defender. He's not going to be a good defender right away. Carter Bryant is going to be a good defender right away. That's what I'm trying to tell you. His role at the NBA level is so simple right now. Like, Carter and Kaman have the easiest projection to be like role players at the next level right away. Among players that are not Cooper Flag. Cooper Flag can also be the ultimate role player right away, right? For Carter, it's just hit corner threes, run in transition, crash the glass offensively, cut without the basketball, which he is known to do and very good at. And on defense, pick up the best player. Like, pick up the best player on the defensive end and just be a pest. It's not going to be perfect, but he's going to be above average at it right away. And that's a huge value add, man. You're paying a guy lottery money. You're going to pay him $7 million, $6 million a year right away. He can help you. And when he's not able to help you, or when your roster is maybe healthy, or when you're hitting a part of your schedule where you don't necessarily need his services, cycle him into the G League. He's shown that he has the humility to go down there, and that's where he can work on his game, work on his mid post stuff, work on his ball handling, his creation stuff, and then maybe by year 3 or year 4, you have an all-star. That's the hope with Carter Bryant, that by year 4, you have a Jalen Johnson type all-star. Now, Jalen Johnson's not an all-star, so, whatever. But I think he could be a better defender than Jalen Johnson. That's just the thing, right? I think he's got similar athletic tools and maybe similar offensive package in it. Again, I just think the context of him would be so different if he averaged 11 points per game. I think if he averaged 11 points per game, like, he's a top 8 player for everybody. But because he averaged 6 in 19 minutes, people have a different view on it. And I just don't care. You see what I mean? Like, I just don't fucking care. Like, I was willing to put Peyton Watson top 20 when he averaged 3 points per game. So this stuff doesn't faze me. College productivity is irrelevant to me. Obviously, efficiency matters to me at the college level, but productivity, when you've already been very, very productive at the high school level and your role just wasn't to be that, there's so many times where, he's been on a team, even when he was the best player on the damn team, and his role was go shut down the other star. See, I kind of like that about him. I'll remind you, Scotty Barnes averaged 11 points per game for Montverde, and then proceeded to average 11 points per game for Florida State. And then he averaged nearly 20 points per game in his third year in the NBA. So my point is, like, it doesn't concern me. Like, people see 6 points per game and they're just like, oh, well, I guess he's never going to score 10 points per game. He might come out next year and score 12 points per game in his rookie season. Channing Frye. No, I definitely don't see Channing Frye. Yeah, I mean, Devin Booker, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, go look at what these guys averaged as freshmen. This is just irrelevant. You know what Carter showed me this year? Uh, I view his lack of productivity as actually a plus. I actually do. Number one, if he was as productive as I think he could have been at maybe a different school where, he didn't do what Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper did. He didn't kind of just negotiate the top NIL dollars and just go to a place that was going to be like, okay, take all the shots you want. Like if he'd gone and done that, then I don't think he would have been as prepared for the NBA level. I think he's super prepared for the NBA level right now. No, number one, he knows how to come off the bench. Number two, he knows how to be a role player. Like he kind of did the role in college that he would play in the NBA. Like this is a guy who has really good head on his shoulders, really good parents, and he's had really good guidance through this process. Again, just doing a lot of research on him over the last month and a half, I'll tell you, his goal has been NBA the entire way through. And the only reason, and he was one of the last players to declare for the draft, and thank God that he has. I think the only reason that he declared is because he has a lottery promise. I think he does because it's easy to imagine that he could come back to Arizona next year and probably get 3 to 4 million for NIL. So if he can get 3 to 4 million for, and Arizona has a couple of 5 stars that have, committed. So I will consider Carter 7, 8, 9, but I'm picking top 4. I'm swinging for upside. Carter is upside, dude. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Like when you talking about potentially getting a top 5 defender in the NBA going forward, like maybe a top 10 defender in the NBA, maybe one of the best wing defenders in the NBA in a few years, that is upside. When you're talking about putting that next to Scotty Barnes to lighten his load so that he has a little bit more legs for offense, when you're talking about putting a cutter of his size and his athletic profile next to 3 very, very good passers in Jakob Poeltl, Scotty Barnes, and Brandon Ingram, you really are talking about an organizational fit, right? So, anyways, that's it for me today, and we will definitely have that video up. The next video, the draft interview, which is going to be great. You guys are going to love that one. If you love the last one, you're going to love this one too. So that's going to be fantastic. We're going to be talking about Carter Bryant. We'll be talking about Noah Senge. We'll be talking about a ton of players. We'll be talking about, what skills translate, what factors translate, all that stuff. We'll debate it out. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great, great show. So that's going to be happening tonight at midnight. So again, I'm not sure if my guest is going to be cool with us doing a live at midnight. So we'll see. If it's going to be a live, y'all will know about it. Ask him about Tyrese Proctor. There's definitely going to be an entire segment about Raptors second round draft targets, and we'll definitely look into that. So, yes. It's interesting. I was watching Masai Ujiri's post-draft interview after selecting Bruno Caboclo. Yeah. Seems like they got burned a few times on trying to figure out whether their guy was going to be there, not going to be there. So they just pick whoever they are comfortable with. I think if we walk out of this draft with some variation of the following factors, okay, this is to be a dream. If we walk out of this draft with Kaman Malawach and Adu Thiero, I'll be very happy. If we walk out of this draft with Carter Bryant and Ryan Cockbrenner, I'll be pretty damn happy. If we walk out of this draft with Kaman Malawach and Hugo Gonzalez, I will be ecstatic. And, if we walked out of this draft with, and I mean, this would be very unlikely, but if we walked out of this draft with Kaman Malawach and Bogu Markovic, I would be quite happy as well. There's a lot of different combinations, right? I don't think. Do you think we'll get another first? I don't think so, man. I don't think so. It's nice to think we get another first. Certainly when I do this whole thing in NBA 2K, I always end up getting another first. I have concerns about the Raptors' wing depth because there's too much parity and not a great deal of upside, right? When you talk about Ochai Abaji, very similar, simple role, not a great defender, but a decent defender. Grady Dick, very complicated role. So like Ochai had the very simple role, Grady had the very complicated role. Among their wings that are young and upcoming, probably Jacoby would be my favorite. But it's like, is that a star? So you just kind of have like that deficient star upside in your wings. Hypothetical, would you trade Harper for Bryant and Malawach? Yeah, I would. Most people wouldn't, but I would. I mean, it really depends on how high you are on Dylan Harper. If you think he's all league, if you think he's really that good, then no, you don't. Like, obviously. We talked about Kaman's 0 rebound game already, right? Yeah, I don't really care about like one game. You know what I mean? Like I'm not living and dying on one game, especially like there's this misconception that because it was the biggest game of the year and he didn't do well. That's a pretty good comparison. He's a lot bigger than Richard Jefferson, and he's a lot better I don't want to say he's a better athlete. He's a more functional defensive athlete than Richard Jefferson. Yeah. No, it was an important game, but also maybe Google the context around what Kaman was going through that day, and you might feel a little bit differently about it. Like you hear that the president of the country in which you're living, especially when you are an African prospect, right, coming from South Sudan. Again, like there's not a lot of political stability in Africa. You know what I mean? Like something you learn, because I've been to Africa a few times, been to Sierra Leone, I've been to Egypt, I've been to a lot of places in this world. And what you realize is that the relative political stability that we in Canada enjoy and take for granted is not the relative political stability that other people in other countries have. And so when you come from countries that don't have a great deal of political stability, you kind of grow up assuming that bad things can happen because your government can do terrible things. So, yeah, like my point is it's not so easy to it's quite easy to judge, right? And just be like, okay, well, come on, I'll watch. Really fucking ghosted Duke that day and really blew it. I think Duke's implosion had kind of started without Malawach, right? Like I don't think the pressure got to him. I think they were very physical with him, and I just don't think he had it that day, unfortunately. And it's the craziest thing. We all wake up on days where we just don't have it. Okay. I certainly didn't have it yesterday. I had a considerable amount of brain fog. I'm recovering from being sick. Even right now, I'm probably a little bit frazzled and disorganized. You've certainly heard lives where I'm very chipper and extremely fluid, and all my thoughts are coming out in a very consistent, very entertaining stream, and it's all quick and it's all hitting, and maybe I'm a little bit witty and funny and whatever. And then there are some that feel a little bit more like a slog, you know, and they're a little bit more mellow, and maybe I repeat myself a few times, or maybe I stammer over my words, or maybe I say a few times. And, you know, that's normal. We all have good and bad days. The problem is my bad days are not dissected by millions of people. Commands are. And yeah. So, and it's not even a bad day. It's like a bad hour. You know what I mean? It's not even a bad hour. It's like a bad 15 minutes. You know what I mean? The pressure is so high for athletes, right? Especially young athletes. And there's nothing at all, by the way, that Kaman could have. I'll make a very, very clear statement here. If Kaman is on the board, you take Kaman and you run. You run. You run. Okay? You run to the fucking podium, man. You, like, I'll tell you right now, I'm on the board. Kaman is on the board. Carter's on the board. All these players are on the board. Noah Senge's on the board. There's 35 fucking, people trying to call me. There's 3 teams trying to trade up for my pick to maybe get this other guy and offering me this and offering me that. And I'm just like, click, turn off, silent. Adam Silver, yeah, give us Kaman Malawatch. It's the simplest decision, man. It's so simple. You make this decision and you run. He's not a bust. He's not going to be a bust. He's not. He's, I understand his pipeline better than most. Okay. It's not just because of the Joe Tuamu interview. It's just because I've researched the BAL and NBA Africa Academy and just understand implicitly for years. I've understood where Kaman is coming from and what kind of guidance, tutelage, and experience he received. There's nothing that he has gone through basketball wise in his life that could have prepared him for being on this rock star team, which was the Duke Blue Devils this year, and how well he performed. I think he beat expectations better than Cooper beat expectations. Like, he was so good at his role and he was so efficient at his role. Now, you may not value his role. I value his role tremendously. He breaks the defense. Like, he breaks the defense completely. On the offensive end, he runs into the paint. There's 3 players on him every time. He breaks the defense. In transition, he breaks the defense. Again, he runs right down the middle. He runs like a gazelle. He breaks the defense. He sucks the defense in. It opens up all of your corner shooters. Khan Kanoupal is more open because he rolls that hard. He's a good screener. He's not a great screener yet, but he'll learn. And under Darko and Jakob, he's going to be perfectly great. Then you take the defensive elements of it, and he's so good at it, man. Like, he's such a rim deterrent at that stance, and he's so aggressive, and he's got like a bit of a nasty streak to him as well. He is such a no-brainer prospect. It's ridiculous to think that anyone is out here even thinking about this. There's no need to think about this. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to overcomplicate it. You have a 7'2" coordinated athlete who has an insane motor, a great thirst for knowledge, has grown probably more than any player in this draft over the last 2 years. And yeah, he's 7'2", he's coordinated, and he can shoot. Like, shut the fuck up, okay? Like, stop. Like, sometimes it's just this obvious where you just need to ask people to shut the fuck up, okay? When people are trying to tell you that he should be like 13th or 14th, you're like, all right, cool. You don't have eyes. Like, let's just move on, okay? Holy shit. Rocco Zakarski is going to be a Jokic level steal for some team. Well, I don't know about Jokic level steal, but I am very, very high on Rocco Zakarski. Apparently so high that I left him off my board. I had him at, like, honestly, I've had him anywhere from 34 all the way to 50, depending on when you ask me. I don't think he had the greatest season this year, so I would probably put him, like, right now, he's like 42, 43. But I don't know. I'd be perfectly fine with Rocco Sikorsky at 39. I think that's maybe a player who will be available that the Raptors could look at. I think he's relatively coordinated for a 7'3" guy. He moves reasonably well for a 7'3" guy. I think he would blossom extremely well under Darko and Jakob. I think he can get a ton of run in the G League with Ulrich, and you'll just block shots. Nobody will score in the G League against this 2-headed monster of, Rocco Zakarski and Ulrich Shamshi. I mean, honestly, like, the names are awesome, right? Ulrich, Rocco and Ulrich. It's a great 905, man. The 905 anchored by Rocco and Ulrich. Rocco with the block. Ulrich with the block. It's great. It's great, man. It's fucking awesome. Flag is a great defender. Malawach is not. They're both great defenders. They're both great defenders. Great defenders. What are you talking about? What makes Malawach not a great defender? He has extremely active hands. I think he's reasonably switchable. I'm not saying he's not Carter Bryant, in terms of his switchability, but he's reasonably good. He guards the position pretty well in terms of like post position. He's not moved off his spot necessarily that easily. I mean, granted, he was 18 years old. Can we be for real about that? Right? He's got a long way to go for sure. But like he can get so much more toned up. Like I don't think people realize he's got a lot of strength and conditioning work to go. But what you're not going to be able to do is you're not going to be able to like hang on. Let me see if I can find Oh, right. Silly me. Hang on one sec. Let me just pull this up. So this is okay, so this is okay. So 52 seconds of him basically doing the Yi Jian Lian treatment of going up against nobody. But I think you need to understand that what he did at Duke and what Carter did for Arizona was they filled a role. The role is not specific to, okay, well, this is all they could do. So that's why they did it. That's always the mistake that people make, right? They filled a role for a team that had players who were just ahead of them. And that doesn't mean that they can't be a completely different player for you. I think that Kaman is going to be an all-star. I really do think that. I don't think he's a role player. I think Carter has all-star upside. I don't think he's a role player. What I do think is that next year they could be a great role player for a winning team while they figure out all that other stuff. And then 2-3 years from now, maybe we could talk about the all-star stuff, right? Ingram is our offense. He's a really big part of your offense. He's not your offense. IQ, Scotty BI, come on, Jakob. Holy shit. Come on with our development would be a beast. Yeah, and I think, like, here's the thing. Clutch Sports, African prospect, Toronto Raptors. Christian Koloko, check. Ora Shamshi, check. We've done this before. Okay, and I think Ulrich developed really well. I think Koloko developed about as well as he could. I think the Raptors were very fair with him through his entire process. So, and honestly, if we don't get Kaman, I would like to see Koloko back with the Raptors. That really wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. I think the Raptors were making some good headway with him in terms of his development. Darko had, I think, done a really good job in that year where he was sort of recovering from the blood clots before he got waived. And I sort of wish the Raptors had just kept him at that point. But nevertheless, maybe it's maybe it's a little bit of not wanting to lose an asset for nothing, and then maybe you just want to get him back. And at this point, you should just be like, okay, well, he's 25 years old and he hasn't cracked regular NBA rotation minutes. Maybe he's just not going to work out. But I would try it. I liked Christian Koloko as a defender. I think the Raptors don't really have a player like him on their roster right now. So if you don't get Kaman Malawach, I really wouldn't mind getting Christian Koloko back on the cheap this offseason. Yeah. Who would you be okay with? Who would you be okay giving up this offseason in a consolidation trade? Ochai, RJ, Grady. Those three, mainly. I always try to stay away from trading those rooks. You know what I mean? Like Jonathan Mobo, there's too much of a connection with Scotty, and then Jamal Shed, there's almost like a personal connection at this point of like, I don't want to trade one of my favorite players. And then Jacoby, it's like, damn, I can't imagine trading Jacoby. So I think I got way too attached to the Jurassic 5 to the point where I can't even imagine trading those guys. But for the right price, obviously, any of them are going, right? There's no one's untouchable here. But yes, I think the RJ part of this is important to realize that, you just you have to be aware of the fact that this is some Carter Bryant stuff.
Carter Bryant with a block.
Carter Bryant, another guy.
Like, you just have to see how he moves. Look where he is on the basketball court here. He's number 9. Okay. He wore number 4 in high school, but he's number 9. Look where he is. So this play, I think, tells you everything. He gets beat. Backdoor. Okay. So you're in trail. I think that's when Henry Vassar stops. Now what? Help the helper, right? But he's not in a position to help anybody. Number 5 has just as good a chance as number 9 right now of coming back and actually stopping this open guy here. Do you see what I mean? Like, you cannot possibly have 2 eyes and not understand that this is a replicable and translatable thing that he could do at the NBA level at an elite level. Like, this is the kind of shit that OG Anunoby got paid a lot of money to do. Okay. And then you take the transition. Look at how quickly he just darts up the court. Like, converts defense, and he's gone. Just gone. He's a blur, man. And the idea here to get behind the defense shows you like how smart he is, because he didn't cut through the defense. He cut around and then cut behind the defense so that he can get himself this open dunk, right? Even this shot right here. See, I don't like his base at all. I hate how his feet and his legs are kind of like into each other. But the upper part of his shot form is perfect. It's a perfect shot form. So if Darko can work with his feet and Jama can work with his feet to get his base a little bit better, I think his jump shot could be like a 40% 3-point shooting jump shot. Again, this is a crazy play too. Gets his own rebound. Here's the defender right in the way. 2 foot. And just jumps right over him. Watch that play. Like, he's like a fucking pogo stick. Boom. Now, one of my favorite defensive possessions. That's a center, right? That's a center. And look at his defensive positioning to bump this guy off his spot and make sure that he holds. Like, you can tell he gets a lot of pleasure out of stopping guys defensively. Now, the ball is away. There's no way that he should be able to poke this basketball right now. Shouldn't be able to get it. Well, watch what's going to happen. Look at the wingspan. So kind of like feeling bad for the offensive player here. As he's about to turn into the jump shot, thinking that maybe, he'll be able to make a move, the hand immediately goes up to block the sight line, also to block the pass. And the second he starts to try to make his move, there goes the poke. Just pokes it away. This is against Duke. Look at how quickly that shot gets out. Now, paint is congested, right? Look at number 9. He cuts through. Cooper flags on him, right? But seeing that he's got a guard driving into the paint here, and that Cooper is going to get preoccupied, as Cooper often does as a help side shot blocker, Carter intelligently cuts away from this congestion to offer his guard a pass right here. And that's Cooper flag contesting. And he can't get through. And here, this is the transition stuff I talk about with this guy. Well, that's not the transition stuff. That's a half-court shot. Fluke. But point being, you watch enough Carter Bryant, you really do start to see the vision of an all-star level type of player. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed here, but the floor is so incredibly high that what you have at base minimum, in my opinion, is like a 13-year, 12-year starter at the NBA level who's going to be like all league defense at least 3-4 years. That's a pretty good value add at 7. Maybe if you do end up at 4, you have to double, triple, quadruple think this a lot. But yeah. OG vibes. There's a lot of OG in this game. I just think he's so much more functionally coordinated than OG. Even you watch OG in high school or you watch OG tape at Indiana, there's still like a little bit of a hitch in how he moves around the court. Carter is so fluid. So Carter has more star upside than OG ever did, in my opinion. Anyways, enough rambling. Appreciate y'all. 250, 300 of you who chimed in while we were live, and hundreds of you who will watch it after. Let me know what you think of Carter Bryant, what you think of Kamal Malawach, what you're hoping happens in the draft, and perhaps let me know any other questions that you might have for my guest tonight, and hopefully we can use that for our mailbag. All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Have a great one. In fact, I'll give you one final floor for Carter Bryant. Jaden McDaniels. I think he'd be Jaden McDaniels. Peace, guys.